this is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now.
Could you state your name and what you do, please?
Yeah, my name's Clive Davis Swain. I'm a filmmaker and a college lecturer.
How did you meet your friends who taken drugs in the past?
I met Robert and Colin, who were the two guys that we're talking about, 26 years ago. And we met through mutual friends.
Were they taking drugs at the time?
No, they were both clean and sober when I met them.
Did you ever think there were the sort of people that might pick up drugs?
Well, both Robert and Colin were both heroin addicts. So although they weren't using and they didn't drink, there was always the possibility that at some point in the future, yeah, they would go back to using. Although, to be perfectly honest, I didn't think that either of them were.
What was it they did for a living?
Colin was a playwright and an actor, and formerly a lead singer in quite a famous band. And Robert was an abstract artist, quite a good one.
And what can you tell me about them, like the personality?
Well, they were both really lovely, super intelligent guys, very creative, very arty. Just really nice people, really, very good people.
What do you think contributed to them taking drugs? Was it the lifestyle, or maybe the people surrounded by at work, friends?
Okay, I've got no idea why either of them started taking drugs. And actually, I don't think anybody can genuinely answer that question. You know, I mean, I think people can tell stories about how they first started taking drugs. In terms of like why they ended up taking drugs in the first place, like, you know, whether it's genetic or whether it was like, you know, family stuff or whether it was, you know, other kind of things, I don't think anybody really knows. We all make up our own stories about that.
Was there ever a time they came off the drugs, or maybe you helped?
Well, I mean, they were clean when I met both of them. Colin was clean for about 18 years, and Robert was clean for about 9.
And what was the reaction to that? Was it like a steady process? Did they handle it well, or was there a lot of discomfort there?
There was never a point in either of their lives when drugs and alcohol weren't an issue. In other words, they never got to the point where it was never ever going to be, where it wasn't part of their lives. So you could say that every single day in and of itself was a struggle.
Did you ever think that maybe one day it might be fatal in the future? Did that ever cross your mind?
Pretty much anybody who's in recovery from drug addiction knows that if they go out there again, that the things that they face are basically jails, institutions, and death.
How did that make you personally feel when that crossed your mind, if you did think about that?
How did that make me feel?
Yeah.
I think the thing is because you don't really know who I am, you're asking all the wrong questions. See, the thing is, I've been clean and sober for 26 years. So I'm an ex-alcoholic and drug addict myself. How does that make me feel? The answer of how it made them feel, I guess, is the same as it makes me feel, is that it's not something that I particularly want to go back to, and it wasn't something that they particularly wanted to go back to either.
So looking back, do you think there's anything maybe you could have said to them, maybe to help them get off before anything failed up?
No, because the circumstances of their relapses is that they were both IV drug users, which I never was. So they both used to kind of inject heroin rather than taking it in other ways. And as a result of that, both of them contracted an illness called hepatitis C. Colin didn't get his diagnosis until he was about 18 years, clean and sober. So he didn't find out until quite a long time in. Robert knew quite early on because he was quite ill quite early on. So the treatment for hepatitis C is a thing called interferon, which has it's like a 50-50 chance of being effective in curing the illness. Now, in both cases, it did cure the hep C. However, the side effects of that can be things like a thing called fibromyalgia, which is like immense joint pain. And the recommended treatment for that is the taking of codeine to deal with pain relief. People that take heroin or are opiate addicted are particularly vulnerable to prescribed opiates, in the sense that it has to be handled really, really carefully. And unfortunately, in both cases, they both kind of took pain medication to deal with genuine pain prescribed by doctors, which they did in a really legitimate way, but in both cases that pushed them back into not full-out heroin use, but back into kind of drinking and also other bits and pieces, which kind of destroyed both of their lives, really, leading to Robert committing suicide by mixing methadone with alcohol, which is a really bad idea, which he knew was a really bad idea, which he did whilst living in the Cyrenians homeless shelter in Newcastle. And Colin was slightly different in the sense that he had a very, very high blood pressure. And towards the end of his life, when he was kind of drinking a little bit, he didn't kind of regulate that properly, and he had a brain hemorrhage and bled out.